Jim Rogers sat down with Book TV to talk about his latest book, Street Smarts. In the book, Mr. Rogers talks about his life as an investor, retiring at age 37, and his post-Wall Street adventures. This 15-minute interview was conducted at Planet Hollywood Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, the site of Freedom Fest 2013.
Jim Rogers, how did you retire at 37?
Well, it was a long, hard slog. I used to love what I was doing, investing in the market. I worked at it all the time because I loved it so much, and did a few things right, had a remarkable success, and I'd always wanted to have more than one life. I didn't want to wake up one day at age 75 and still be watching a computer screen. So I said, okay, now I'm going to have some more lives. There were other lives I wanted to have. I pulled some of them off.
What did you do right?
Bought low and sold high. The 70s were not a great time for the financial community, as you may remember, or you may have read about, but we constantly loved what we were doing. We found the things that were where the fundamentals were changing dramatically, found cheap things where things were changing, and we jumped in and bought them. We borrowed a lot of money to buy even more, and it worked.
What did you do wrong?
My first wife.
When it comes
to
investing,
what a terrible mistake that was, for goodness sakes.
Well, when it comes to investing and street smarts, what did you do wrong?
Oh, I made plenty of mistakes. I can remember one of the first one that pops to mind is, I remember in 1980 I shorted oil. I shorted oil because I thought oil was going down. It still hurts to remember. And that was the weekend that Iran and Iraq went to war. Needless to say, oil went straight up. Straight up. Now, I would like to say it's your fault or somebody else's fault, but it's my fault. Whenever I lose money in the markets, it's my fault. I haven't done enough homework, and that was another case. Somebody knew that war was going to start. You know, you have to move troops. You have to get ready for a war. You can't just sort of snap your fingers and start a war. So I was remiss, and I lost money. But
what does it mean
plenty of times I've lost money.
What does it mean to short the market?
You sell something when you think it's going down. If you think something's going to go down, you can sell it short. So you sell it, and then it goes down, and then you buy it back. Most people buy and sell. If you sell short, you sell and buy. It's the same process. You do the same two things. You just reverse the order.
Is Wall Street a free market today?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by the question.
Is it a pure market? Maybe that's a better question.
Well, nothing's a pure market. You have staggering amounts of government regulation. You see what happened in 2008. We had a huge collapse because of hopeless government regulation, which led to all sorts of mistakes and problems. So, if the government hadn't been bothering with it, we might not have had that collapse, or it would have been a more measured collapse. It would have happened over time rather than happening all at once.
Now, Mr. Rogers, you have a quote in your book, Street Smarts, that I want to ask you about. And this was regarding, here it is, this SEC investigated us over our investment, your investment, George Soros is your business partner, called Computer Sciences Corporation. The SEC claimed that my partner, George Soros, was engaged in stock manipulation. He was charged with selling the stock short only to cover his short sales by buying shares back at a lower price at the upcoming public offering. He was given the opportunity to sign a consent decree in which he and the firm admitted no wrongdoing but promised not to do it again. Why wouldn't we agree to sign it? I asked him. Why sign it if we did nothing wrong? Why let it be construed like we were manipulating the market?
That's why I didn't sign it. Of course, nobody asked me to sign it because, I still, to this day, and by the way, that was 35 years ago, so Peter's a little hard for me to comment too much, but because I just don't remember it. I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, much less what happened 35 years ago. But I don't quite see what's wrong. If you sell something and then buy it back on the offering, it seems to me to be perfectly legitimate. Whether it is or not, the SEC didn't think so, and George didn't want to fight it, so he signed the consent decree.
Mr. Rogers, in Street Smarts, you write that during an interview on CNBC, it was you were talking about shorting Fannie Mae, something you'd been talking about for quite a while. And in your book, you say that the interviewer opined that the collapse was your fault.
I know. It's embarrassing, isn't it? Short sellers cannot make Fannie Mae go bankrupt. I mean, my goodness, no short seller went out and made horrible loans and took up huge amounts of leverage, et cetera, et cetera. What short sellers do, just like people who buy stocks, they're just the messenger. They see what's happening and so they invest. If you see a great new product and you buy the stock, are you manipulating the stock? No, you're buying the stock because you're trying to make a profit. If you see something's going to fall apart and you sell it short, you don't make it go down. In fact, it might go up. It might hurt you very badly. You can lose money. So if it goes down because the company's making mistakes, that's just another way of making money, taking action in the markets. Now, you probably bet on football games. When you bet on Team X, you're betting against Team Y. Understand? You're betting against Team Y. But that's what short sellers do. When they say that Company X is making mistakes, they're betting that it's going to fail. Just like you bet that Team X is going to fail.
Is short selling good for the market?
Absolutely, it's very good for the market because it holds down some of the excesses. For instance, if a stock is going from 10 to 100, but it's a fraud, but people get swept away with it. If the short sellers come in at, say, 80 and start selling it short, then it never makes it to 100. So all the buyers who are buying a fraud don't buy it at such a high price. Maybe they buy it at 90, maybe they buy it at 85. So at least it limits some of the rises. On the other hand, when it starts going down, let's say, since it's a fraud, it would probably go to 2. But since the short sellers have to buy it back, the short sellers start buying at 8 or 6 or 5 or whatever. So the poor people who bought the stock at 80 instead of 100 can at least sell it at 6 instead of 2. So short sellers do limit some of the excesses in the marketplace, and they're very good for the market. And they provide more liquidity too, because when something's going straight up and everybody's begging to buy it and nobody wants to sell, thank goodness for the short sellers, because they come in and provide liquidity.
Mr. Rogers, who did you write Street Smarts for?
Well, partly for me and for my children. I've got 2 little girls. I wanted them to know the whole story. I came to parenthood late in life. I used to think children were a terrible waste of time, energy, money. I was never going to have children. I used to feel sorry for people who had children, but I was totally wrong, absolutely 100% wrong about having children. These little girls are so much fun for me. I cannot get enough of them. In fact, if there's anybody watching the show who hasn't done it, I urge them to get home and get on with it, you know. Take a day. Well, don't take a day off these days. These are perilous times. So go home for lunch. Have a lunch hour. I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun. Everybody should do it. I'm glad I didn't miss it. And part of it's for me, part of it's for my little girls.
Why did you move to Singapore in 2007?
For my little girls. I want my little girls to grow up knowing Asia and speaking Mandarin. The 19th century was the century of the UK. 20th century was the century of the US. 21st century is going to be the century of Asia. So I'm trying to prepare them for the 21st century. They were born in 2003 and 2008. So we moved there so they would speak Mandarin and they would know Asia. It's not going to make them successful, but at least it will give them a leg up coming into the 21st century.
You write in Street Smarts, empires always overreach, they always overspend.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty simple, straightforward statement. You can look it up. I'm always under the impression that everybody knows that. Unfortunately, most people aren't aware of that, but it's a very simple, unfortunate fact of history. And that's another thing. You need to understand that. You need to understand that countries and empires fail too, just like stocks fail, companies fail.
The staggering debt loads in many countries will lead to major changes in the way we all live and work. Many old institutions, traditions, political parties, governments, cultures, even nations will decline or collapse or simply disappear, just as always has happened in times of political and economic turmoil.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, but it happens to be true. Lehman Brothers, which you may have heard of, was a firm which had been around on Wall Street for 150 years. 150 years. Bear Stearns has been around for over 80 years. Disappeared, gone. just like that. You're going to see a lot more of that. Museums, universities, institutions. No, it's going to be a mess because too many people have run up too much debt, and somebody has to pay the debt in the end.
Jim Rogers, isn't Singapore more highly regulated than the U.S.?
Oh, no. Well, I don't know how you mean regulated. No. As far as the economy is concerned, Singapore is one of the most open and free economies in the world. As far as society, yes. Now, Singapore gets a bad rap because they say you can't chew gum. You can even chew gum in Singapore. You can even buy gum in Singapore. What you cannot do in Singapore is spit your gum on the street or put your gum under the bus seat. They don't like you doing things like that. So if you ever go, you will see it's a very clean and tidy nation. They don't like people throwing garbage onto the street or spitting gum onto the street.
Does Singapore have its own currency? Does it have a Federal Reserve type system?
It has its own currency. Nearly every nation has its own currency these days. It does have a central bank, but since it's a country of 5 million people, it cannot have quite the influence on world affairs that, say, the United States Central Bank does with 300 million people and the world's largest economy. Now, Singapore has been the most successful country in the past 40 years. There's nobody who's done as good a job as they have in the past 40 years. But having said, and they got huge reserves. But having said that, there are only 5 million people in the country, and no matter how influential and how correct they may be, they cannot influence too many other people.
In Street Smarts, you write, Ben Bernanke, look at the numerous projections Ben Bernanke has made over the years, and it quickly becomes evident that he has seldom been right about anything.
Yeah, I put seldom in there just to be safe. He's never been right about anything. If you can find me sometimes where he's ever been right, I will certainly give him credit and put it in the revised edition of the book. Poor man, I mean, he's an Ivy League professor who does not have a clue. He doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand finance. He doesn't understand currencies. All he understands is printing money. And it's going to be the ruination of all of us before it's over.
Do you have a date when that ruination will start? I mean, the markets as we're taping this, the market's at record highs.
They certainly are. Well, Mr. Bernanke is going to leave early 2014. So I guess he's trying to get out before it collapses. So I guess the collapse will come sometimes after early 2014. If I were a betting man, I would probably say maybe 2015 will really it'll start all coming apart at the seams. I mean, what they keep doing, they keep printing more money. Now that's wonderful. The people who are getting the money are having a fabulous time, as you pointed out. Stock markets are making new highs. But the rest of us, this is going to be disaster for the rest of us. You cannot have an artificial system based on a lake of floating on a lake of printed money. It's going to end badly. It's going to end very badly for all of us. So be careful. Before the next presidential election, be very, very careful.
Today, the United States alone graduates over 200,000 MBAs a year, as opposed to 5,000 annually in 1958. This is a waste, you say. Why?
Well, first of all, we don't need 200. And by the way, in 1958, nobody else had any MBAs. Now the rest of the world has tens of thousands more too. So we probably have 300,000 MBAs being cranked out every year. We don't need 300,000. By the way, in 1958, America was the richest, most powerful country in the world. We produced all these MBAs. Now we're the largest debtor in the history of the world. So these MBAs haven't done much for the United States. Some of them have done well for themselves. But now we have massive overcompetition in MBAs in finance. We have huge leverage in the financial community. Governments are coming down hard against the financial types, taxes, regulations, etc. No, getting an MBA in 2015 is going to be a terrible mistake.
Is there a politician in the States today that you think is projecting the right message?
That is?
Projecting the right message?
Well, Rand Paul, who's the son of Ron Paul, certainly understands most of what's going on in the world. Jim Bunning, who was also a senator from Kentucky, did, but he's no longer a senator. But no, there are not many. I mean, as I said, America's now the largest debtor in the history of the world, Peter. Let me repeat that. In the whole history of the world, the United States is the largest debtor nation in history. And the debts are going higher and higher. That's not a very good record. Show me somebody who's who's been against that, and I will say, yeah, we need more of him or her.
We've been talking with Jim Rogers. His most recent book, Street Smarts, Adventures on the Road and in the Markets. This is published by Crown Business, and you're watching Book TV on C-SPAN 2.
You're watching Book TV. Next, Stephen Meyer sat down with Book TV at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas to talk about his latest book, Darwin's Doubt. In the book, Mr. Meyer discusses the mystery surrounding the origin